Welcome to the, ooh, yay, I have amplification. Welcome to the, what is it, May installment? It's been a couple months since I've been here. The May installment of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting. Let's go around and do introductions. Who's dying to start? Heidi, do you want to start? Or Carrie, do you want to start?
Carrie Sheldon, Precinct G.
Eric Henderson, Minnesota Council on Disability.
Doug Cook, Metro Transit Liaison.
Patty Thorson, Trellis.
Allison Edmond.
David Fenley, I am the chair of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Patsy Murphy, C.
Richard Rowan, AARP.
Claudia Thugli, MNCCD.
Heidi Meyer, Minnesota CCD.
Awesome, and I see we have one, two, at least three people online. Diane, do you want to go first? And then, go ahead, Diane.
Diane Graham Raff, Trellis.
Thank you.
Chris Bates, Precinct B.
And then as a third person, I'm guessing it's Sam, just based on previous.
Sam Precinct A.
Perfect. Thank you all very much. We do have a quorum. I would entertain a motion to approve today's agenda with one slight revision. Unfortunately, Hannah, the Government Affairs Liaison with Metropolitan Council, is not able to be here. Makes sense, though. The legislature is kind of hot and heavy in conference committee now, and she is required to monitor the Transportation Conference Committee. So she did send me a short update, which I will share on her behalf. So it's not much of an adjustment, just the fact that she's not going to be there, and I'll be giving an update in her place. But with that being said, I would entertain a motion to approve the May agenda.
I move.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have two motions and a second. I think Sam seconded, and which one of you are dying to get the movement? Chris or?
Chris.
Okay, we'll give it to the people online. Thank you, Chris and Sam. All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay?
Aye.
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 Sweet. Thank you all very much. Now I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from April. Now's your chance.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Eric. And I'll take that as a second, Chris. Is that okay?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. All in favor, aye. Opposed, no.
Aye.
Aye.
Yay, it passes. Thank you all very much. Let's move on to business. We have a fun Blue Lake Street renovation update. I know that we've had, I think, at least two of these so far. It's going, I think quite well, but we'll find out right now. Christina and Jenny, welcome back.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Christina Morrison. I'm with Metro Transit Engineering and Facilities, and I'm a principal project coordinator working in the public facilities group. So we work on design and construction of everything kind of public facing at Metro Transit. And then I'll let Jenny introduce herself as well.
Hi, thank you for inviting us to be here. My name is Jenny Ackerson. I'm a planner at Metro Transit Engineering and Facilities on our planning and urban design team. Our team focuses a lot about your experience at the bus stop and also in renovating facilities as well.
Can we have her speak closer to the mic?
Oh, sure. Yes, Heidi, thank you. Yep, just a little closer to the mic if you'd be so kind. Thank you very much. And take it away.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about the Blue Line Lake Street Midtown Station in Minneapolis. And this cover photo just shows an interior view of that station as you're coming up the escalator, looking at the inside of that upstairs vestibule, looking out onto the platform, kind of the perspective of a person riding up that escalator. And Jason, we'll go to the next slide, please. So we were here last May at this committee to talk a little bit about the Blue Line Lake Street Station renovation project. This station is approaching 20 years in service, believe it or not. So it is kind of due for some refurbishment and a little bit of redesign. The scope of that project includes both of the vertical circulation buildings, the two towers, one on the south side of Lake Street and one on the north side of Lake Street. We're also looking at everything on the platform level, so shelters, the canopy, those sort of windscreens, as well as all the passenger amenities that people use to ride transit. And the photo here, I'll just say, shows the exterior of the South Station entrance. We had an opportunity to add a mural to the exterior of this building last fall, and so it gives you a kind of a colorful entrance to the station. Next slide, please. So starting in 2022, we worked both internally and with some of our customer feedback to look at some of the challenges that we face at this station. We had 3 years of customer feedback that we went through, including police calls, maintenance work, things that people call in that are coming directly from customers, as well as polling internal staff to talk about what those issues are. And the top items that we saw were cleanliness, inappropriate use of station space, so behavioral issues, things like smoking, drug use. We had some dangerous behavior, unfortunately. And then just the building design and the materials choices, having a lot of enclosed space, having a lot of glass makes it challenging to keep that space kind of in its best shape. And I'll say the photo here shows I believe this is the North Station lobby with the elevator out of order, which unfortunately is more common than we'd like in this space. So we also have identified that in addition to kind of a long-term renovation, we also have a number of short-term issues, repairs, kind of these urgent improvements that need to be made. I mentioned the mural that we did last fall. That was a project led by our public arts administrator, Mark Granlund, and that replaced a building that had had a lot of graffiti and sort of damage as we cleaned that graffiti off. So we've had a lot of success with this mural, being able to keep it in a nicer state and also kind of bring some happiness to the community as you look at something nicer than a gray wall. The other things we're looking at include deep cleaning, special repairs like ceiling repair. We're actually working on an art project inside the station as well. We did a full signage replacement, and we are looking at addressing some of the ADA and building code issues that were identified in the 2019 audit. Excuse me. Sorry. And then we're also looking at adding 24/7 unarmed security at this site. The other items that we're really dealing with, and this is very prevalent, is just continual elevator outages at this location. We do have a bus bridge, we have rider alerts, and onboard announcements on LRT, but these things are really challenging to keep riders informed and updated what's going on there. And we'll go to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Jenny.
So I'm going to dive into what we've discovered over the past year about what we want to get out of this renovation. What were the themes that emerged? So we kind of have 3 main topics, and the first of which is to provide the new station and renovation should provide more reliable and consistent ADA access to and from the platform. A 2-story station is very challenging. It has a lot of the issues that Christina just described. So the kind of golden ticket item that we've discovered would be advantageous is to add a ramp to the south tower as a third element of accessibility, complementing stairs and an elevator on that side as well. And this would give us a way to have egress egress as another option, but an emergency egress. So we wouldn't need to have a bus bridge in the event of an elevator being out like it is too frequently. In addition to improving the accessibility, we want to see that the elevator can be moved closer to the street. Right now, getting from Lake Street to the elevator is insurmountably longer than if somebody were to take other modes to get to and from the platform. The second major theme is really more on the back end for us. We want to make sure that we can reduce the daily maintenance needs at the station. It's been described through customer complaints and an internal inquiry that it's just, it's a large and difficult station to keep clean, just to the way that the building is designed, through the materials that were chosen. So we would like to swap out materials so that maybe there isn't so much glass that can be susceptible to breakage, but we can use other transparent and durable materials to achieve the same effect. We would also like to make sure that there's less of a burden on our cleaning staff to maintain the station. Today, anytime we have a snow event, there is a lot of time spent on clearing those accessible paths, and if we had appropriate overhangs or windscreens or some combination to that effect, we could reduce the amount of time it takes to make that station accessible in that instance. Another example is that today we do not have adequate water supply hookup or storage and access spaces for our cleaning staff to get their job done. So we want to make their job as easy as possible, and that won't really be front and center in the public until you notice that the station is just in a better state of cleanliness all the time, which is our goal. This picture here on the slide 2 is showing 2 of our facilities workers that know the station in and out, and we really used a lot of time in interviews and site visits with them to learn about the challenges of how we can design the station better as well. Next slide, please. The third theme is quite a large one. We want to improve the customer experience at the station, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people, and that can look like cleanliness, as previously described, but comfort in many definitions, improving visibility, wayfinding, lighting, and safety. So there's a lot of concept or tactics that we want to achieve that. First is that today, the experience of accessing the Lake Street station from Lake Street is akin to going through the back door of someone's house. You have to kind of cross a long distance, turn around, access the stairs or elevators, and we want to have a more direct connection between the platform and Lake Street. So turning around the stairs is going to be a simple and novel solution to improve sightlines, get people to access their bus transfers more quickly, and feel that they are, not going through the back door of the transit station. In addition to that, we found that if we provide reliable accessibility options, that we may not have a need for escalators and we can widen the stairs. With it being a center platform, any kind of space that we can provide accessibility is going to be pretty essential here. In addition to turning around the station, we are trying to resolve the need to have an oversized lobby to house these elements today, and we can create an open-air station. So this is a good time for me to point out the image on the slide here. It's of West Bank Station, which is an open-air station on the Green Line, and these stairs are covered on both sides with a metal mesh. And there's also art inclusive of here. There's birds kind of lining the whole station. But this still achieves breathability, so air is flowing through. It's not fully enclosed, but it does protect from weather or climate elements here. You can see this is after a snow event, and there's not very much snow on the stairs themselves, so that also ties back into kind of the cleaning burden that we were discussing. A few other elements relating to improving the customer experience. We want to make sure that we can delineate transit spaces and the ground plane public spaces. Today, there's ticket purchasing options on the platform and in the ground plane lobby, but we would like to clearly delineate that once you kind of climb up the stairs, the elevator or the ramp, that you are now entering the transit station, and that would be considered a paid fare zone. Today, we would like to have high quality lighting throughout the station and making sure that we can achieve those clear sight lines for people and for cameras as well, because for some people's definition of safety, that is knowing that someone else is also able to see what you see on the platform. I'll have a better visual in another slide to discuss this concept more clearly, but today on the platform, we have a lot of kind of bus shelters, if you will, that create that kind of climate wind protection, but that also does create a lot of materials to obstruct your sight lines to get in the way of queuing or getting on and off the train today. So we would like to free up the platform by not needing to have those elements. And kind of lastly, this is a discussion about more and better protection from weather. This being a 2-story station that crosses Lake Street, you kind of feel like you're on a windy cliff, and we would like to make sure you do not feel like you are on a windy cliff while you're waiting for the train. Next slide, please. So today we have 2 concept images to share that was developed through this process. So I ran through a long list of all of the design details that we hope to achieve, and this is kind of a rendering of what that could look like. So the 2 main things you're going to notice from this rendering picture is the idea of a ramp. So that'll be on the right side of this picture is a ramp that you could enter from Lake Street or from 31st, and it will be flanking the Market Plaza Park that's adjacent to the station today. The idea for this ramp is it's for all reasons and purposes in addition to being an emergency egress. So a lot of people have strollers or luggage, a variety of wheeled devices. You could still walk up there and get a lovely vantage point of the park if you would want to. But we would like to tie into the adjacent park and have seating as a part of it so that we feel like this is a shared public space in addition to being an element of accessibility to the platform. The other main thing you're going to see from this rendering is a more substantial canopy and windscreen covering the platform. Today we have gaps well, there's effectively no windscreen today, and there are gaps in the canopy that could make it uncomfortable when you wait on the platform. There's too much snow accumulation on the platform today, kind of these other themes that were emerging over the past year. And next slide, please. This is the second concept rendering that we're going to show you today, and this is what the new platform could look like. So this is, now you're inside of this more substantial canopy and windscreen, but you are free from, you have free and clearer sight lines. You can have a little bit more visual wayfinding here. There's a nod to that you could see downtown on one end and get some directionality while you're on the platform, not having to solely rely on transit information or announcements, right? Trying to have a more holistic understanding of where you are when you're on the platform, and importantly, being able to see other people, have more space to queue on and off the train, and more space to access the elevator, the ramp, the stairs, whatever you need here. I think that about wraps it up for me. I'm going to pass it back to Christina. Thank you.
Thanks. So just to give you an idea of the timeline we're looking at, a lot of our work in 2022 and kind of to date in 2023 has been internal to sort of figure out what are the existing conditions and opportunities and some of these themes that have been emerging in sort of looking at those issues. We're really kind of just starting the public engagement phase of this project. So we recently launched a website as part of Metro Transit's website at metrotransit.org/high-lake. So you can look up just some kind of basic information. We'll be adding a lot of information there as we continue to progress through the project. We're going to be entering the full design phase, so a real detailed design where we work with both internal and external stakeholders to talk about kind of all the technical elements of this renovation. The other big projects that are coming through this area in the same time frame is that Metro B-line construction, so that's BRT line, is starting actually next week. They start construction, but at High Lake, it's next spring. So they're doing sort of one half of the construction and then the other half. So this B-line construction at High Lake will be in the 2024 section, and it's actually being constructed by MnDOT as part of their full street reconstruction. So I know there's been a lot of concern about pedestrian safety at High Lake, and that's one of the items sort of driving MnDOT to redesign this interchange. So that construction will happen about a year from now. That will start. We've been working with MnDOT really closely. They're at about 30% design to talk about how we can best maintain access to the LRT stations, to both towers during construction, knowing that many people use them every day. And then the other item that we're really coordinating with and looking towards is the Blue Line State of Good Repair project. This is a project in Metro Transit Rail Engineering, and trying to coordinate some of our construction impacts with the State of Good Repair project that's going to be replacing some track and signals on the Blue Line that is going to impact light rail service. So seeing if we can sort of work within our own kind of concurrent projects to see if we can reduce those overall impacts for customers. And then we're just starting to talk about kind of construction impacts due to the station itself. This is a very high boarding station at Lake Street, and so we really take seriously the trade-offs between a station closure versus retaining some access during construction and sort of mitigating some of those impacts. So those are things we're just starting to talk about, but we'll have more to come kind of in the next year over the design process. And I think that's all we have today, but happy to take questions.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I had 2 questions, but both of which were answered during your presentation, so thank you. Heidi, go ahead.
I'm Heidi, and my concern is because I don't use a wheelchair, but I use a crutch, and when I see those long stairs and the bus is like 10, 15 minutes down, that long stairs is, but I don't know, it looks like I'm going to get a workout, but I'm concerned about not being able to meet my bus, and then, because I'm working so hard to make sure I'm safe going down the stairs. Now, I can do stairs, that's not the issue is how they're built, and then that becomes a barrier of me not being able to do it, because I should have the same rights as my friend who is with me, and he's already down at the bus stop, and I'm still working on figuring out how to get there fast enough. So I was concerned, and the way it looks, I don't know if it will be cleaned off enough, to be safe, So you have to think about people who have mobility problems, walking, and if you have a brain injury or if you have certain movement problems. I mean, there's a lot of ins and outs I can tell you that would scare certain people not even wanting to take the bus because the elevator is down. So their safety, and I know by the U they have one where you can take the stairs or the elevator, and it's good to have choices, but if one's always broken, it makes it hard to have choices.
Thank you, Heidi. That actually reminds me of something else. So there used to be, or there still are, but they're not working, escalators at this platform, is that correct?
That's correct. So there are escalators at this station. I would say almost daily outages are pretty common. We've found that escalators don't do well in the very cold weather. They don't do well in the very hot weather. They're kind of like an orchid. They are very susceptible to like a piece of paper or a rock or anything that gets stuck in them will shut them down, and then they have to be kind of restarted. So the escalators are a real challenge, I think, especially in a high traffic station where you have a lot of people coming through, a lot of kind of wear and tear on those. One of the things that I wanted to address is the design of the stairs. I think we're looking at different options, multiple options for how those stairs might kind of be broken up, like they might turn in order to get them to face the street, but also to face the center of the platform. So we are looking at a couple of different options that as we get further into design, we'll have more information about that. Yeah.
How many elevators are going to be on the platform?
We're currently proposing 2 elevators, one on each side of Lake Street. And as Jenny said, bringing those elevators closer to the street. Today, they're pretty far from the curb, I think almost 80 to 100 feet from the curb. And so can we bring those closer into the street so you can make those bus transfers a bit easier, less distance?
And I'm looking, just one second, Heidi, I'm looking at if you mind going back to the street level park view, I think on the right I see the, or maybe we can't go back, that's fine. If folks have their printouts. But so I see that sort of green concrete wall, is that part of the ramp, or is that the ramp that I'm looking at?
Yes,
We're gonna
so
get to go
our
back.
designers illustrated a living wall, so to speak. That's to be determined if that's our best solution, but right, the wall itself would be the ramp kind of switching back, and underneath that would be an opportunity for us to have operations and maintenance space folded into that as well.
So the ramp's not covered then?
No.
Okay, that makes sense. Obviously, that would be maintained in snow and ice conditions. And you say you have problems with the elevators. I would just maybe put it out there that if you continue having issues with the elevators, not to rely on the ramp as an excuse to not fix the elevators, please.
Yeah, Chair Finley, it's a good point. I think, our issues, a lot of our issues with the elevators stem from them being almost 20 years old, and the typical elevator has a lifespan of about 20 years, so we are kind of coming up against that deadline a bit, and especially the south elevator that's been out for some time is in need of major repairs. Those are kind of long lead items that are under order, but certainly I think having as we replace these elevators and look at kind of a future refurbishment program, thinking about something more proactive for taking care of those elevators as we move forward, because they are a critical part of our system.
Yeah, it definitely would decrease the time of getting up and down from the platforms. I know that ramps require a lot more square footage than steps do, and a whole lot more square footage than elevators do. I'll go to Heidi since I saw her hand first, and then Chris, and then Claudia.
When you do the remodeling, are you asking people who have disabilities or actually live it every day to test some of this out to see if it really works, or do you just take somebody's word that they're following certain aspects of it? Because we can tell you the real truth of what's going on. Like Claudia can tell you the wheelchair, and I can tell you the walking part, if I can even do or follow what you want me to do and go where I need to go and get to that bus stop if, at a good time. Though I'm not always missing one, just because of the stairs, because the elevator isn't working. Because that looks like a mountain, and I don't mind mountains, but there's a point to it where I should have the same rights, as everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. I would say the answer is yes. We've actually participated in those station design workshops, and we're here right now giving you feedback. But if you want to add to that, please do.
Yeah, Chair Finley, committee members, I think that's a good point. We're just really starting the design process. Some of these renderings are kind of concepts to help us talk to the public about what the possibilities are here. But I think there's a lot of questions about the ramp, about what it looks like, about how it feels to use it. Is it practical? Is it something that we want to look at pushing kind of further under the LRT bridge? I think there's a lot of questions still to come, and this is a good kind of jumping off point to talk about some of those questions. And also, we can continue to engage this group and others during design.
Heidi, that's actually a really good.
Would be great.
This is actually a really good point, and I'll propose it to you all. Like, if you do want to do a site visit, have some folks from this committee maybe visit if the timeline is right. Summer, fall for your design process. Just tossing it out there, because we have participated in both mock-up site or station design things, as well as site visits. So thank you, Heidi, for bringing that up. That's a really good point. So yeah, let us know if you want to do that. It doesn't have to be at the TAC meeting. It could just be folks who can join, 2 or 3 people. Hopefully a chair user or 2 would be great. But yeah, keep in touch with us. Thank you. Who did I say next? I said Chris next. Or did you have a clarification question on this topic, Robert?
Richard.
Richard, sorry.
Quick question or comment is, keep in mind also people who use manual wheelchairs. Going up a long ramp can be a chore for somebody who's using their shoulders
to propel themselves. Yeah, and this looks like it's going to be a pretty awesome ramp. Chris, you're muted, or we can't hear you for some reason.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
You're good.
Mr. Chairman, my concern is on the accessibility is if you get rid of the escalators. I can't do steps at any place. it has to be an elevator. The escalator, I can fold the walker and put that on the escalator, but if the elevator's down, I can't use that site then because I can't do steps. So I think you have to rethink the escalator issue and a way to make it. It's got to be an alternative to the elevator.
Thank you, Chris. It's a really good point. I think that really is just an argument for making sure the elevators are maintained. Yeah, with a multi-level platform like this, I mean, like we heard, escalators don't. It's like daily outages, you know. And at that point, what's the point? Hold on, just 1 second. But I will toss it to our presenters to see if they can address that. But yeah, it is a concern. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say that the escalators do require conditioned indoor space, and that's been kind of part of the challenge is, you can't have turns in an escalator, so your stairs have to be kind of facing away from the station. You create that long distance. And then also you need to have basically a building to house that escalator in. And I think in looking back at some of the original designs of this station, the reason that we have a lobby is because of the escalator. It's kind of to take care of that escalator. So it's a very expensive, I'll say, way to maintain that piece of infrastructure that it hasn't been very successful in keeping it operational, which it's a challenge that we face. We don't have a lot of escalators in our system.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, we typically have them at places that are maintained by others, like Terminal 1 at MSP or Mall of America. Those are escalators we do not maintain. They're also fairly enclosed within a building rather than kind of more in these outdoor conditions where people are bringing in salt, especially into onto the treads. But I don't know, Jenny, if you have anything else. That kind of covers it.
Probably not a satisfactory answer for
No,
you,
it's
Chris,
not.
because it sounds like there will not be elevators at the site.
Yeah, they're very challenging.
Claudia, and then I'll come back, Heidi. I see you.
I'm looking at the security. What will you have around security with the corridors and stuff? Keeping the troublemakers from hanging around there, making it safe for the passengers.
Including the park.
Yes,
Yep, I'd
go
be
ahead.
happy to speak to that briefly. At Metro Transit, we have a contract that was just passed through the council to have supplemental security for 1 to 2 years as a pilot, and that is to assist the Metro Transit Police Department's staffing shortages. So that will be 24/7 presence at this facility as well as 6 others, I believe. But that is a short-term contract to see how that delivers. If that's successful, what do we need? But there is I am not sure what the plan will be once this facility is open.
Thank you. Before I come back to you, Heidi, I want to give other members of the committee a chance to ask questions. You have a question? Go ahead, Daryl.
Is this project, is there a cost savings to this? That's why we're proposing the renovation and not choosing, I mean, obviously it's 20 years old, so there's obviously a reason we'd be doing it. But there's obviously cost savings by not having an escalator or those kind of issues, right?
Yeah, Chair Fenley, committee members, I think some of it is about state of good repair. So we have elements in this station that are failing due to structural issues or just need of, like the elevators, they have met their kind of 20-year lifespan and they just need to be replaced. Some of those we just need to have a renovation to keep those in good repair so that this station is usable. I think our long-term goal is that the station is it does save some resources on the maintenance side. Today we have staff that spend 4, 6 or more hours there just pulling trash, going up and down. They also rely on those elevators and stairs to get up and down with their equipment, with trash cans, all kinds of things. So just thinking about how we can make it more efficient for the people that work there every day, and also how we can create just a a good experience for transit riders. As I said, this is one of our highest ridership stations on the Blue Line.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go check and see if we can't get Ken Rodgers let in. He's waiting in the room, tech support, if you could let him in. Otherwise, I'll knock on your door. Heidi, go ahead.
My other concern is because you have a nice park you were thinking of putting together, and I know close, like in St. Paul, the park, by Harriet Island and all that has been, kind of trashed, and they're thinking of remodel, but it's so close to the bus line, so I'm hoping that that beautiful picture you gave us stays beautiful and doesn't get ruined by, for the homeless people, and not against them, but I just don't want that to go. And then the other thing is I'm concerned, because I've had this happen at a hotel where an escalator was set at a speed that was faster than my disability could understand. So I couldn't use it, but I figured out how to use it because that's what we had to use in order to get where we needed to go. So you need to think about that and make sure the sides are lit up really good, if you're going to use an escalator. That sounds like you are. Where the yellow lines are on the side, so you don't end up being a part of the escalator, for safety reasons. So keep that in mind, because I scared myself learning how to use an escalator that was a little faster than my disability understood. So keep that in mind, because I don't know who's going to do the maintenance and how they're going to fix it, and I don't know how much knowledge they have. Thank you.
From what I understand, there will be no escalator. Is that correct? After the renovation? Yeah.
Well,
They're taking it out.
It
Heidi.
sounds like it may or may not be. I don't know.
I'll let the designers tell us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, committee members. So far in our concepts, it was determined that the escalators are not our most viable path for a collection of accessibility elements. I won't say they're 100% discounted, but that is not the direction we're moving forward in at this time. And then if I could speak to kind of the first comment that Heidi made regarding the park. So that park is already there today, and that was built by Hennepin County, and it is now owned and managed by Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board. The primary use and programming of that park is for a farmer's market twice a week in the warm months. So that's kind of the main programming that's occurring, but there is seating and a playground there today. The concept rendering we showed kind of just looked like all grass, but that is not the true state of the park today. So we do imagine that while we are pushing forward a lot of new designs in this renovation, that there will be some kind of cooperative operational agreement between us, the county, the park board, all of our agency partners to make sure that we have a cohesive space.
Cool.
Good. I hope that goes just as smooth as every other time you all partner with other organizations and entities. Go ahead, Doug.
My question is a clarifying one for Chris. I understand if the escalators were out, that would be difficult for you. I was just wondering, does the ramp, is that still going to be a go for you, or that would be a no-go too? Because they're usually at a pretty good grade. Yeah, they need to maintain that. We can't hear you, Chris. Sorry, you're muted again.
Chris, go ahead, Chris.
Is he?
Okay, yeah, Doug, a ramp would work. And, as long as it's at an angle that you could handle with the walker or with the cane.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot harder for me to get up and down on a ramp, but I can do a ramp. But if the elevators are out and there's no escalator, it would have to be a ramp because the stairs are just impossible these days.
Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify that.
Eric, and then Patty.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. With the public engagement, how are you planning on engaging the public, I guess? And do you have a time frame yet set for when that's to occur, if it's going to be in 2023?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Chair, committee members. We have an outreach coordinator, Cody Olson from Metro Transit, who's going to be working on this project with us. Kind of our base outreach group is that MnDOT has been doing a lot of outreach in this area for the past couple of years. related to the design and construction of the roadway underneath the station. And so there is sort of an existing group of stakeholders, people on Lake Street, residents, property owners, kind of a broad group that has been assembled for that project, and we intend to start by building on that group. They're already kind of experts about this site. But I think one of the things we're going to do as we enter the design phase is that we're going to bring on an outreach consultant to help us produce like a stakeholder plan for how to reach people, and to also do things like host public meetings, whether they're in person or virtual, to table at the market and other events like open streets, things like that. So we will be bringing on more staffing resources in order to have a more kind of robust outreach plan.
Just when the committee or the consultant's onboarded, it'd be nice, I think, if TAC knew when that engagement's open. It's another resource for us. I mean, you probably might come back and give us updates too, but just for us to look at it and give some input too.
That's a great idea.
Thank you. Patty, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm thinking about looking at the stairway, and I know color contrast or color or some sort of contrast is helpful. I use a wheelchair. I also walk. I also have depth perception. I don't have peripheral vision outside of here. Nobody exists over here.
Thanks.
She's still a nice person.
And so when I look long distances, whether I'm walking or if it's a large crowd, if there's no contrast, I don't want to go flying down either head first or wheelchair first, not realizing that there's, I'm not sure which way I'd rather go down. Neither.
That's a very good point.
I have just a follow-up question on that.
Go ahead.
So when you talk about color contrast, are you talking about like the stair tread or some kind of like delineator?
Something like that. As I was just looking at the drawing, I was thinking about maybe pulling out, you've used yellow. Heidi's talked about consistency of color. Yeah. You've used yellow to sort of alert people to some change, and so it could, it could be tactile as well. But because on a wheelchair, you don't have as much time to make adjustments, and so if you see something ahead is going to be a different terrain, you have more time to get around people that may not be aware of your immediate need.
And even if you have low vision, those stairs would be scary.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what do you all currently, and I know there's a push for consistency. I know this particular light rail, all the stations were different, and you moved away from that as a design standard. What do you all do now with stairs and demarcations for where they begin or where a ramp might begin?
That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know, Jenny, if you know. I'll say that two-story stations are very much in the minority in our system. Each of them is pretty different, and I think we have looked at them kind of individually in the past. But I think it's a good point that we could think more comprehensively about how to treat like the entrance to stairs or something that is more consistent throughout the system. That's not something I've thought much about, but it's a really good idea.
Yeah, just being aware of, even within one station, are you know.
Yeah.
I support her even with the stairs being, for the low vision people, because it just looks like all gray and dark and dingy.
Yeah, thank you both, Patty and Heidi. Anybody want the last word here before we move on to the next presentation? No? Awesome. Thank you both very much for coming.
Thank you.
And we look forward to the dates for when public engagement is and then a potential site visit,
Oh,
maybe.
I
You
did have one question.
have one more
real
question?
quick.
Go ahead, Heidi. Yeah, you can finish it off.
My question was, is it so hard to teach somebody who has processing problems? Because you said that each station is totally different. Would I get lost in there when you send me, because sometimes I don't take, it's like 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, follow the direction. But is it so bad, it's worse than the airport,
Well, I don't think, and I think someone from Metro Transit can speak better to this, but at least in terms of conceptually on the Blue Line originally 20 years ago, there were more community artists that were brought in to kind of make the stations unique. I think wayfinding is all the same. But in terms of just like how the station looks, there was an eye towards keeping local artists involved in the design.
I just want to be able to use the different stations without getting lost,
Yeah, and I think Metro Transit moved away from that, but I don't want to speak to that. Hold on one second, Daryl. Did you want to add to that?
I do want to.
Okay, go ahead. I'll add to that, and then I'll let you all address
I
it.
do want to add to that, and they may be able to correct me if I'm wrong. When we designed those stations here in St. Paul, we designed them intentionally to be different, and that's why the local artists came in. We did that for folks that had some orientation issues and disorientation, so we purposely did that, and that's why the artists came in to bring the individuality piece to it, and it was a lot easier to memorize what station you were at if they were all different, right?
Sort of landmark of the station.
Right.
Yeah.
So we hope that we keep that in some way throughout the system and kind of incorporate that as we build, build on the system. We look at that. We often talk about that through the BRT and things like that as well. So,
David.
Please, go ahead. Is this to add on to what station design? Okay, so if you want to address that, because I might have misspoken. If I know this is 20 years ago and we were all, babies then, of course.
Yes, Chair, committee members. So that's right. When the Blue Line was designed, it was sort of, the thought was charms on a charm bracelet. They're all different. They're all kind of special. And I think over the last 20 years, what we've learned about Metro design is consistency is king a little bit. So there is that balance. I hear that idea that bringing in local art and is a form of wayfinding. People can remember where they're going, and maybe you get off the platform and you are like, oh, this mural reminds me that I'm going to the South Tower instead of the North Tower or something like that. And I think we will continue to incorporate public art, especially in this station. But the idea, just like on Green Line, of kind of the kit of parts, that individuality is like really limited to specific elements, maybe fencing or something, rather than, on Blue Line, we had brick pavers. That's not something we would do again. So I think that we've learned a lot about how to create these stations to make them usable, first and foremost, but then after that, identifiable. So it's definitely a balance.
Thank you, Ken. I see your hand up. I'll go to you, and then I'll go to Patsy, and then we'll move on. I think we'll be able to find some time at the end of the meeting so we can go over a little bit here. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, this is quite a while ago when the Central Corridor work was being designed and implemented, but I sat on the Citizen Advisory Committee, and we did learn from the Blue Line creation initially, but the Green Line, people are correct in that the look of the stations may have a unique look, but the footprint of the station, they're all the same. The footprints are all exactly the same. So where the machines are in each location is the same. Where the seating is, it's all the same. It's where the uniqueness could be placed is also the same on each station. It's just different art that's included on each station. I know when we're now looking at the Blue Line extension, and there has been some talk of color changes on the stations, but again, the footprint is going to be exactly the same. So I don't want people to get too confused that yes, they may have a visual appearance that may look different, but it's going to be pretty consistently the same footprint.
Thank you, Ken. That really does help. Patsy, final word.
Well, I've never been to this actual site, so I'm kind of lost on a couple things, but I've heard discussion about removing canopies, and other times it's adding covering and whatever. So I'm kind of lost. Are we looking at removing the walls and whatever, or keeping them? And I see just back and forth on here, different things are being said, so I'm kind of lost.
Sure, I'd be happy to respond to that. Thank you, Chair, committee members. So I think the image that's most helpful is the one that says platform view. In the top right corner, and I apologize, when I was initially speaking, I didn't call this out. The top right corner image on that page is the platform today, and that represents the kind of bus shelters that are center lining the platform itself. So that's a lot of panes of glass, a lot of structural metal that's kind of getting in the way for your ability to get on and off the train or see down the platform, but it does create like a windscreen or climate protection for you. And what we would like to do, instead of needing those kind of bus shelters on the center of the platform, is to move those structural elements to the outside of the tracks and on top. So that's the new windscreen and canopy enclosing the entire station, or covering, rather than putting that in the center where the humans are. So moving it out to the outside of the structure. I hope that clarifies.
So it's safe, thank you. So it's safe to say that there will be a lot more protection from the elements in the redesign than currently exists.
Yes, that's what we were trying to achieve.
Okay, perfect. And one more question, to kind of build on Patsy's. I know I stated the last word, but I lied. So in that canopy, I'm guessing those are glass skylights, not open air, open.
I'm not sure that they'd be glass, but they would be transparent,
Plexi,
not open
yeah.
air. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, just
we typically
they would
use
catch
like
snowfall.
Yes, we typically use like a polycarbonate, like a strong plastic. Yeah.
You're clearing that.
Probably not.
Right.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
That was informative. And I can't believe it's been a year since you were last here.
Well, I'm sorry.
Karl
Sorry, I was
Hedlund.
late.
And my coworker Tiffany is joining me.
Okay, perfect. Well, you're not on the agenda, but we'll let you still be here. I'm kidding. Welcome, Tiff. Well, welcome, Tiffany. Welcome, Karl. Thank you both very much.
And confirming you can all hear me well enough from here? Awesome. I'll just start off by saying, as a Lake Street resident, I really appreciate all the work you're doing at this station. It's one I use frequently, and I think all of the improvements you're suggesting will improve my commute on a daily basis. So looking forward to it. My name is Karl. I'm an outreach specialist for Move Minneapolis.
I'm the executive director of Move Minneapolis. My name's Tiffany Orth.
Yeah.
How do you
And
spell your last name?
ORTH. It's like the word north without the N.
And what's your title?
Executive director.
Thank you.
thank you all for having us here today. Really, my goal from this meeting is primarily to introduce ourselves as an organization and start to give you an oversight of really what we do in a very quick fashion. But I hope throughout the presentation you can get a sense of what points you might want to hear from us in the future, or what ways we can engage with as we go forward, because we would love to be able to have your feedback on some of the work we do on a regular basis. There's a number of questions at the end of this, but hopefully we've left enough time to have some good discussion as we go forward. You can go on to the next slide for us. Sorry, I guess there's transitions in here. Can you just click forward to where the... Perfect, that's great. We're Move Minneapolis, so we're a federally funded nonprofit known as a transportation management organization. Primarily for downtown Minneapolis, we focus on improving air quality and reducing congestion through facilitating ways for folks to get around in their commutes in any way other than driving their own car. So often that looks like transit, carpooling, active transportation, walking or rolling, or a lot of the different micro-transit options that are showing up, shared mobility, different things like that. Like I mentioned, we focus on commuting often this is leveraged through employers to help in the conversation of how we're getting folks to and from their daily needs, whether that be work or whether that be different errands, et cetera. On the screen here, you can see our team on the bus, as well as us at one of our events with an employer, relocating downtown, trying to help all of these new employees, folks who are new to downtown Minneapolis. It can be a bit of an intimidating space to navigate around with all the different transit lines that are going around as well. You can go on to the next slide. Sorry, would you mind clicking forward just a couple times here? Perfect. I got this conversation, sorry, should have thought better about this. As I alluded to, we have a number of different things we do to promote the use of different ways of getting around. The way I like to think about ourselves is a liaison between transportation providers and commuters themselves. So we don't actually have leverage over the transit services. We're not Metro Transit, who was just here speaking with you before us, but we're often the folks who are out there on the street helping commuters figure out this system as it exists now, and helping folks figure out how they can get around in their daily lives. Often that's leveraged through employers. So as you can see again on the screen here, we're working with some folks, my coworker Catherine and I are helping folks figure out door-to-door service from their home to wherever they need to go. So you can get that service through Metro Transit online, but we want to meet you where you are and kind of get in that sense of changing habits so folks aren't just relying on driving their own car. We produce a number of different resources and consultations. Is going to allude to a couple of those that we're generating in the future that I would love some of your feedback on as well later in the presentation. And then we also do a lot of promotion. So a lot of what we do is kind of changing the narrative that driving your own car isn't the only way that people get around, as well as it's a lot of the ways that we need to build into our everyday life, and kind of changing that narrative that we're a city that relies on a lot more than just folks driving their own car. You can go on to the next slide. Starting on those resources and guides. So we develop a lot of different print materials, as well as different items we can have at our events, as well as generally out there for the public to use. The ones we have existing so far were instigated by the transition to remote work and a lot of the different changes that happened through COVID. So we have a remote working guide that's available for employers online, as well as a guide for affordable transportation. A big reason I wanted to bring this up today is that we are in development of 2 guides in the future, those being a transportation accessibility guide, and kind of paired hand in hand with that are micromobility guides. So that's providing guides for folks who will be using electric scooters and electric bikes and those shared material items, and we want to make sure we're integrating respect for right-of-way and the right way to use this equipment in our city that allows for navigation as well.
Quick clarification.
Yes.
What's your definition of accessibility?
That's a great question. I think that's kind of where we want to start this conversation. When accessibility means a lot of different things, I think in this sense, we are thinking of physical accessibility. I think accessibility is something that we need to be integrating in all senses of that, and defining it seems like a good point of feedback as a place to start.
Yeah, well, there are 2, I mean, at least in our community, 2 definitions. On the overarching definition, which, how does anybody access anything? Like increasing access, could be, making sure that it costs less money. That doesn't involve removing barriers for folks with disability. But then there's our definition, which is more barrier removal. How do folks with limited mobility or other disabilities access that particular thing? So that's why I ask. Is that guide focusing on that definition or the more broader definition of accessibility? It's either one's fine. I'm just curious.
I really appreciate that, and that's why I wanted to start the conversation in this place, is that we recognize that we're new to this space, and we want to start this conversation in a way that we're doing it and not repeating work that's already done, as well as making sure we're doing it in a way that is
perfect. And I do realize that our definition fits into the broader definition as well. But when we're talking about it, that's really what we focus on is barrier removal and access. So cool, thank you for that clarification.
And we're all sharing it, not just one half of it.
Precisely. Thank you, Heidi. Continue, sorry.
No, no.
I'd like to save questions till the end, but I did want to make sure that we...
That's why we're here. I really appreciate you
Definition's
jumping in.
correct. Thank you.
If you want to progress on to the next slide, but I wanted to note these that just for those reasons is that we are wanting to bring the expertise we have as well as the expertise you have to all of these different points of guides we're providing in use for these materials as well. One of the main ways that we end up relaying information is by webinars. Those are on about a monthly recurring basis. Our last two topics were on microtransit. Those are some of the more shuttle services that are being provided by our transportation providers now, as well as the driver shortage on why some of the bus lines are being cut more frequently right now. So those are topics that are kind of moving the conversation of transportation forward, as well as keeping the public up to date on some of those questions of what issues we're facing in transportation as well. You can go on to the next screen. As I spoke to, so our focus is really in downtown Minneapolis. We are a part of the conversation of kind of bringing back vibrancy downtown, but I wanted to note that downtown really being a unique transportation space, both as kind of the hub in our system of transit, as well as the vast amount of concrete and skyway systems that are existing in the transportation that exists there as well. You can go on to the next screen. Next slide, whenever it's possible. One of our unique programs is what's called the Commute Ambassadors. So this is a group of folks who want to be advocates within their own communities, whether that be their workplace or their social groups of folks that want to elevate transportation needs and ways to get around. And we hope to empower those folks to become passionate commuters and being able to kind of leverage them as folks that we can use our connections with transportation providers to help elevate the issues commuters are facing with transportation providers themselves. So as I spoke to, we're the liaison, both from the direction of helping commuters better understand the transportation system we have, but then also it goes that conversation goes the other way around, is that we really want to be out here talking to folks about what is and what isn't working in the transportation system and ways they can get around in way that we can relay the conversation to transportation providers going the other direction around as well. If you want to go on to the next slide. As I spoke to, we're just one of the transportation management organizations that exists. Tiffany, do you want to speak briefly to some of our other partners?
Yeah, and you all may have interacted with these organizations, but we just wanted to kind of point out that there's different, obviously, geographies beyond downtown Minneapolis and the metro that are covered by other transportation management organizations. So here in St. Paul, we have Move Minnesota, and then obviously Metro Transit covers a lot of the gaps where these other organizations aren't able to provide service. And then we have Commute Solutions in the 494, in the Anoka County area, and then Commuter Services in the 494 corridor. So we work closely. We're really, a big push in the last year has been really deepening those relationships and making sure that we're communicating best practices and learning and working together. And we're also continuing to kind of pilot an effort around our Car-Free MSP, which you guys may have seen is our region-wide event in September to really promote car-free modes throughout the month. And we've been excited to be able to collaborate with all of our partners in that space. Next slide, please. Next slide, whenever you get a chance. And then just continuing that note, so Karl's did a good job of illustrating that we're that liaison role. So this is an example of the different service providers and other hubs and organizations that we work with. And Also really looking to kind of expand our reach with community organizations, ones that are more interfacing with communities that are directly using these different systems. And we really see our role again as trying to kind of elevate what we hear and see from commuters to these providers to improve services, as well as communicate these services and connect people to them.
If you want to go on to the next slide. Tiffany just spoke to it, but the last couple slides here, I want to focus on some of our big namesake annual events. Those being Car Free MSP is the first one. That's a month-long kind of celebration of car-free commuting in the month of September. It's centered around World Car Free Day, which is September 19th. And as you can see on the side of the Metro Transit bus here, we are really trying to kind of get some messaging out around as a lot of different events, a lot of different prizes, a lot of different ways for folks to share their stories, both about what is joyful in their car-free commute, as well as some of the tips and tricks and challenges of how you can make this work in a life that isn't necessarily built around it. You can go on to the next slide. The second of our namesake events is our annual Transportation Summit. This last year's topic was on mobility justice, which you can see a definition of on the screen in the way we presented it. In order for our communities to thrive, people need to be able to move freely and safely no matter their identities. This was a gathering, convening of a lot of folks that operate in the transportation service industry, as well as a lot of the different transportation advocates and elected officials in that conversation as well. It's an annual event, and we're going to be starting the conversation of picking out the next topic in the year forward, going forward as well. On to the next slide. This is kind of really where I want to hand the conversation over. I gave you a really quick overview of who we are as an organization, kind of that recognition that we haven't been present in this space, and talking to you about the work that we're doing, and wanting to raise the question broadly around where you might want to hear from us in the future, in what ways you might want to hear from us in the future, and a couple of pointed questions specifically around those guides I mentioned. The one that's going to be really quickly, with Minneapolis, we've seen a really big transition in the micromobility service providers we've had. We've got different companies servicing the scooters and servicing the bikes that are out there on our streets. And we want to make sure we're kind of inserting ourselves in a place of being able to communicate to the public and the user bases that are learning this system how to integrate accessibility into the basic training and the basic knowledge of those devices as well. Kind of with that really quick overview, I'd love to hand the conversation over to any questions that arise.
Well, I have a lot of questions.
Yes,
I'm going to
please.
I'll ask a couple, Heidi, then I'll come to you, and hopefully some other folks will have some as well. I'm guessing that you're a nonprofit?
We are a nonprofit.
Where does your funding come from?
So and again, a reason we're here today as a part of the Metropolitan Council is that we're primarily funded through federal funding through the congestion mitigation and air quality grants. Tiffany, if you want to.
Yeah, and then that grant funding is actually administered through Met Council's regional solicitation process. So we receive that renewed on an annual basis. And then we also, as part of that, have to have a 20% local match. So that is met through a contract that we hold through the City of Minneapolis's ABC Ramps Mobility Hub. So we contract with them to promote carpooling and administer their carpool registration process. And then we also, we should mention, are an affiliate of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce. And through that affiliate relationship, we have an in-kind revenue generation as well, where we have a shared agreement with them. But we are also, at the end of the day, I think kind of pursuing diverse funding sources going forward. And so looking at that, the opportunity is to receive different grants or provide fee-for-services and work with different service providers as well.
Thank you. My next question will put you on the spot, so I apologize beforehand. I do notice that some of your partners are Lyft and Our Car, there has been an ongoing discussion nationally and also in this state about their lack of desire to provide accessible vehicles for one reason or another. I won't get into that, but I do know that multiple states and cities around the nation have had the courage to require them, and they do it. Does your organization have a position on Lyft or Our Car providing accessible vehicles so everybody can utilize that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And short answer, no, we don't have a formal position on that. I should maybe provide context to how we've worked with them in the past. And it's really been more of a promotional aspect because we feel like we have to be a little agnostic in terms of which service providers we promote over others. Our mission at the end of the day is to connect people to all the different options that are out there. So that is really the formal way that we have generated our partnership agreement. With Lyft specifically, we did have a contract to promote their Nice Ride for All program, which was meant to provide affordability programs that increase signups to that and connecting to lower income communities. That obviously ended as they have ended their involvement with Nice Ride. But we, going forward, I think would welcome the opportunity to look to developing those formal positions. And again, I think that's where we're expanding into as we have conversations with yourself and other entities, and would welcome that opportunity to maybe provide some, to develop formal positions in the future. So.
Do you have a presence at the Capitol?
So through our chamber relationship, we're not able to formally lobby through our funding arrangement as of yet, although we'll look to that in the future. But we do help to inform some of the chamber's transportation advocacy priorities through their lobbying arm.
Awesome, thank you. And so my Lyft Our Car question leads into my next question. About car free, this drive for car free. Mm-hmm. I do want to make sure that it's included in the discussion that, I think a car free society is ideal. I don't think we're at the place yet where folks with disabilities can fit into car free society. There are folks who utilize their vans, Lyft equipped vans, to still get around because they can't do the bikes, do the scooters, do the public transportation as it currently exists. And I know there is a push for accessibility in self-driving vehicles when that becomes a thing, but we're not quite there yet. So as we do push to kind of remove cars and have people use other forms of transportation, that we're not quite there in terms of that capability for our community. Folks with disabilities tend to be invisible in those conversations, so just want to make sure that you are aware that that's something that, it comes up a lot, and I know this is not really pertinent to this committee, but it comes up a lot when corridors are talking about removing parking, mm-hmm. which is fine, but street parking is generally accessible parking, which is great. So you don't need to have a disability parking permit. You don't need to have an access aisle. You can just deploy the ramp onto the curb and then be on your way. And as you take those parking spots out of full corridors, you're essentially disallowing folks who use their cars to get around because they have a wheelchair to not park there anymore. But that's a whole different discussion. But I do know that it does play into the car-free push.
I really appreciate your comments on that, car free, and want to focus that is kind of the namesake of our big celebration event. Don't want to blur the lines between personal and professional life. I am the son of a father who recently, in the last couple of years, gutted out a Toyota van with a ramp coming out the passenger side door. So I'm on a personal life very familiar with those parking solutions. And the way I like to think about it, and it's conversations I've had with him many times, is our goal isn't to have a car-free society. And coming back to that congestion mitigation question, is we want to make the driving experience better for folks who need to drive, is that the fewer folks out there driving their own vehicle who don't need to be, it makes that transportation experience better for folks who are out there driving their cars. And that conversation is our goal there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, and we're actually also kind of examining the use of the car-free brand in the future, but that it's also, Karl, we're also out there kind of actively promoting carpooling and van pooling and different shuttle options that kind of need to exist for folks. And so it's not purely like no cars at all. And the other aspect to this that I think we're really looking to take out kind of the strategic focus of our organization, which is also informing this outreach here, is that we really want to figure out what are the solutions for folks who have more limited options in how they get around. And how can we both bring a sustainability and congestion mitigation lens into that, but also at the end of the day, how can we just best connect people to the options that are available and focus on expanding their choices? So those are the things that we're looking to, that we don't have figured out by any means, but that's why we're starting these conversations now as we revamp our strategic direction and really looking to work with other folks in co-creating that direction.
And my final question, which kind of caps off this particular part of this discussion, and then I'll come to you, Heidi. Sorry, everybody, for bogarting the time here. I'm kind of curious how the mobility justice discussion went, because I think that the last few questions fit really well into mobility justice. Was accessibility and multimodal transportation accessibility included in that discussion?
That was actually part of the reason of why we framed the summit around like what is mobility justice, rather than I think kind of leading with some different topics within that, recognizing that it isn't full encompassing of so many different identities and backgrounds. And so it definitely could have probably been a bit more pronounced area of the summit, but it was noted that at the end of the day, these are all the different considerations that we're trying to elevate and bring forward when we're talking about the concept of mobility justice, and making that, what is that broader lens and framework that we should be applying to every decision, every conversation that informs how people get around. Karl, I don't know if you'd add anything.
I think you covered it well. I think it's, in the planning of that event itself, we really came to that broad consensus of wanting to have an open conversation around what barriers exist in how transportation affects the different ways people navigate their life. A large part of what that conversation this year focused on was how different neighborhoods and different corridors are affected from the history of the way our community was developed, through the history of redlining and through the history of the freeway system, and how we decided to direct a lot of our corridors. I think we ended up with a very large, broad topic of what is mobility justice. The day of itself really focused on some of those ways that the way streets are designed now have impacts on the ways folks navigate and have access to different places in our community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Heidi?
I'm very concerned because the disability community is losing transportation. And what I mean by that is somebody who can take them in a car and go places and do certain things. And I don't want this to be sold, in a way that human services or the legislators get a hold of this and said, oh, there's this neat little program out there, but they're not really helping the disabled. They're just throwing another whole idea. And options are great, and I think those are awesome, but for the ones who really need support and help and being in the community, I want to be able to keep that so I can go to the dentist and the eye doctor and do certain things and be a part of the community, but still use city buses and still use, because I know the disability is using Uber a lot, and because certain transportation isn't very reliable. So they just decided that's what they're going to do. And so just be really careful how you sell this, because it could get in the wrong hands, and I don't want somebody being hurt because, well, there's this program out there and here's a bunch of pamphlets, So I don't know how you're going to be selling it or talking about it in the future, but I like your concept, but at the same time I'm concerned about that. So I just wanted to bring that up. And the other thing is those scooter things, that the kids and adults, they're like those like those little, like a skateboard with a handle on it. Those are becoming an issue, so we need to, and you talk about, new ways to get around. We also need the disabled community to be able to work around that and be a part of that, so we can get where we need to go and they can still use their transportation because they're at parks, they're everywhere, and we just got recertified by another company, and I don't know about just when, this spring and summer if we're still using that company, but they're all over and they get left in places that are not always appropriate for people who can't move those things and pick them up and get around it. So keep that in mind when you talk about transportation stuff. Thank you.
Ken's got a question.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, those scooters being left in accessible pathways has been a big deal. I think everybody understands the problem, but it's really hard to enforce because of, I won't say anything. Ken, go ahead.
Well,
Did you want to address Heidi's concerns?
One thing, thank you so much for that, and I think it's really helpful to have the feedback to think about how we talk about these things and message about it, and so that's, really, I really appreciate that. And then the only other thing I would just add on the scooter front is I think we recognize that, and that's going to really jeopardize a lot of things. And so one of the things that we've tried to propose to them is how could we, as a partner, maybe work with them to provide some more workshops and learning opportunities for folks to have more of a sense of how to use these properly and how to understand what they can and can't do, and particularly targeting that in certain communities. So that's something we're starting to explore. But yeah, definitely noted on those.
I just don't want my freedom to be taken away because someone brought a bunch of stuff, because that's already happening in the disability community. So I have to fight to figure out how that all works. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Ken? Did you hear me, Ken?
You're still muted.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I thought you said Ann. I thought, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so, yeah, sorry. I wanted to share a comment that I think kind of goes back to when David was talking about or asking you about your definition of accessibility. Something that I'm starting to see more and more widely used in the global community when you talk about, because the problem when you talk about accessibility, it means something different to everybody depending on the audience and who's speaking. If you can combine the term usability anytime you talk about accessibility, I think that is a much clearer and more concise approach to understanding that when you talk about accessibility, we really mean the use and the usability of a system. If we can't use it, it doesn't matter who we are, it's not accessible to us. And although that term accessibility by itself can be pretty squishy, usability is pretty concise and pretty clear. So I would urge you that in your definitions, you include the term usability, even when you talk about and create new publications. Usability is an important key.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah,
That's
really
actually
helpful.
that's actually a fantastic point that I'm going to build on.
Do they even understand what that means? Ken's point?
I think so. Oh, so I'll build on it and then we'll shoot Heidi's question to y'all. So I mean, I think that does really lend itself to, accessibility is nice on paper, and if you think about the ADA and you think about the technical specifications in building code, those really are the bare minimum. There's nothing special or prideful about meeting the bare minimum for folks. Ken's comment about usability does really focus on, great, it's accessible by the letter of the law, but can people actually use it? Is it actually a space that people want to go into? So again, looking at usability above and beyond the ADA technical specifications, building code, utterly bare minimum. You're obeying the law if you do that. And I would just assume that everybody obeys the law. That's kind of what we all agree upon as a functioning society. So Heidi, your question was, I'll let you ask it. Sorry, I'll let you ask it.
Well, do they even understand what Ken was saying and know how to take it and put it into reality? Because I can see it malfunctioning.
Okay, yeah, so does that make sense?
I can
Okay.
jump on it, and I hopefully I don't give you too much of a roundabout answer.
No, I
I'm-
just wanted to know because we're asking those questions
Yeah.
like already, and then Ken kind of summed it up, and I was wondering if you really do understand it.
Yeah,
It's a valid question.
I really
Between
appreciate
David
that.
and Ken, you
Let's
kind
let
of
him-
summed
Right.
it up.
Let's let him answer.
I'll take and please let me know if I am articulating this correctly. I'm going to kind of combine David's previous question and Ken's insight.
Okay.
Historically, when we talk about accessibility, we're an organization that talks a lot more about that first definition of is a place accessible if you can get there, if there's a bus route that runs from your home to that place, if places are accessible. I think when that term usability comes into definition, from my understanding, is that other definition of if there are barriers in the physical world that prevent you from accessing that place, is if there are, the usability in my sense would be the lack of those physical barriers in being able to navigate a space and have freedom in your mobility to utilize a space, as well as in more of the micro, how a space operates and how usable it is, as opposed to that broader definition of can you access a destination in a broader sense.
Yeah, so that's the overarching
Right.
definition of accessibility.
Right.
And our definition fits into that.
Right.
Where, are you then focusing on accessibility
Right.
in terms of removing barriers for folks with disabilities specifically?
Right.
Again, it fits into the broader definition, yeah, and intentionally, yeah, it fits into the
And
broader
Dave,
definition.
this is Ken.
Go ahead, Ken, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the explanation you gave, I think I understand it, but I want to suggest that you shy away from equating usability with physical barriers. Because, for example, if we're looking at a network transportation like Lyft or Uber, and I can't access the app to order a Lyft or Uber, I can't use it. So that's not usable to me. And that has nothing to do with the physicalness of getting into the vehicle or what kind of vehicle it is. That has everything to do with, that aspect of programmatic stuff. So I don't want to limit usability just to barriers or physical barriers. I think usability is a broader term, and I want to make sure that that's really kind of the understanding.
Absolutely, and I also, in thinking about this, I think it's helpful for us to kind of really frame up, how we're thinking of our role in this, and we're not necessarily, here, transforming the actual provision of the service, although we hope to be able to elevate whatever we're hearing and observing from people using it to service providers. But really, I think is trying to spread awareness and connect people to those resources and then tips for how to use them. And so when we think about accessibility and usability within that framework, then it becomes a conversation of how do we make sure that our resources are able to reach people, different populations, depending on their needs, and then how we're able to communicate to folks the best way to use these options depending on their individual needs. And so that's, the framing that I kind of want to maybe orient us back into a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I think folks do. Just one second. Yeah, I have 2-3 questions now, but I want to wrap this discussion up. Thank you. I think we do understand that you're not the person who is creating these resources. You're more of like the middle person. You're connecting people and making it easier. I think the reason why you're here too, and the reason why we're kind of dumping all this on you, might be like a fire hose of disability rights and accessibility in general, is when people who you choose to partner with, or priorities that you do set for your organization. When you do choose to move forward with a particular project, are you asking people, are your vehicles accessible? Hey, how about you, even if you don't have to, how about you include one? These are things that you're requiring of your partners, because your customers are folks with disabilities. I mean, folks with disabilities utilize other forms of transportation a lot. So I think that's why you're here. I hope we're giving you what you want, kind of like a crash course in disability awareness as to what it's like to navigate the world. But thank you for making that clarification. I'll do Eric, because I saw you, then Daryl.
Thank you, Mr.
Eric?
Chair. I would have to echo what David said. That's what I was going to kind of allude to. One of the questions you have is who should we be talking to and partnering with? In that partner list, I don't see any advocacy groups for either the disabled or for accessibility, and the TAC is an amalgamation of a lot of those groups. So if you just look at who's sitting around the table from the Minnesota Council on Disability, you have our TAC as obviously full of the different precincts as well. That's a good list, I think, to start with on who you should partner with. But then again, to echo one of David's points, is looking internally within your organization is, do you have internal advocacy? So ADA specialists, or I don't even know what the title could be, but someone there to always be a sounding board, or to, be able to ping or ask those important questions when it comes to the frame of, you're a group, an organization, you said, that looks at accessibility through the big umbrella, but there's a lot of pillars under there, and we focus on that, a different portion of accessibility. And I think having someone in your organization that focuses on it, or starts looking at it through that lens, is really important, I think.
Or has a disability.
Yes, exactly. Because I'm assuming, one of my questions too was, with the annual transportation summit, how many groups were there that would more or less resemble a TAC? Was it all, or was there anybody there that had that lens or frame of reference to offer that summit? I don't know. But if it's not there, I think that's another, if you partner with those organizations, that would be important, I think.
Daryl, and then I think that's it.
I want to start thanking you both for coming. It's a lot to get people up to the table to us, especially when they look at us and they kind of say, "Oh yeah, I'm looking at their lens from a physical standpoint, or I'm looking at their lens from this standpoint." But really, you have to start looking at it from your own internal. How do you get around? How, and the barrier, how you get around. I would like to get around that way too. So intentionally, your marketing materials. I've seen some of your stuff online. Okay, other than that summit or that webinar that you just talked about with what was it about disabilities, or what was the name of it again?
Mobility justice, I think.
Other than that, your materials do not reflect what you asked about today. And my thing is, you're putting together a pamphlet or a flyer about accessibility. When is that supposed to be out?
I'm going to be honest, I don't have an answer for you on that.
Are you guys just thinking about putting it together now? Is that why we're at the table in the beginning, or is that scheduled to be produced and put out in the next 6 months?
The next 6 months, I think, isn't a loose plan. I can tell you that it's an item that's within my personal work plan for the next calendar year, I guess, so the 2023. So we're pretty close to a next 6 months on that.
Because I would say that a lot of your partners and a lot of your internal your marketing people. I mean, there are some great partners on that list. I'm not going to name the ones that I would highlight and then the ones that I wouldn't, but there are a few on that list that I would intentionally push on them and make sure that their marketing materials match what you're saying before you decide to partner with them again.
Thank you, Daryl. Final word goes to Richard.
Well, Eric addressed most of what I was going to say, but the the governor has a statewide initiative called Age Friendly Minnesota, which the goal is to make sure that older people are integrated into the community, and that might be a resource in terms of addressing that portion of the community that needs to be concerned about accessibility. And one other question, just about one of your slides, you said 64% building occupancy. Is that housing or business?
Yeah, that's residential.
Yeah, so that slide specifically comes from some folks we work with at, that's Downtown Council. So the Downtown Council of Minneapolis. So that building, I believe that number is reflecting office space occupancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is
Awesome.
that before the pandemic or after?
That was the month of April for 2023.
All right. Thank you both for coming.
Yes, thank you all so much for giving us your time.
Thank you
here.
for listening to us. I know we dumped a lot on you.
I guess I want to just end with saying that this really was an initial conversation, and I'm sure I'll be following up. And this is us recognizing we're not in these spaces, and really in the next, not 6 months, I can promise, but in the next time of when we actually have something tangible to have this deep of a conversation about. I'd love to be able to bring that to you.
I
as well.
guess the reason I tried to give you a timeline is because we like to work on timelines in the disability community, and we like to get our goals met.
Right.
But more importantly, I did hear a couple things in your presentation that I like. There's a thing that you do in September, right? And I think our committee could possibly partner with you to be included in that project. But I mean, I need to know a little bit more on the front end before I ask my group to commit to that intentionally you guys aren't just doing this for a short-term gain, and you're in it for the long term of really changing the system that includes everybody.
Absolutely.
And not just folks with physical disabilities, but folks that may have some other disabilities that you and I don't even talk about or concern ourselves about on a Friday or Saturday night.
Good. That's a good ending. Did either one of you want to respond? I think that's a nice place to end.
Yeah, no, just thank you so much. And yeah, just to echo that, we have a lot of blind spots obviously going into this, but we wanted to start, we didn't want to go down a path with something big and not be able to have these conversations up front. So really appreciate you all being willing to be so open with us and hopefully collaborate with us in the future.
Feel free to reach out if you have more specific questions, and we like the self-awareness. It's nice that you're here. We're going to move on, Heidi, because we're already way over, but thank you both.
Thank you all so much. And I'd be happy to get on a future agenda and have a deadline of when I can bring you something. I'm more than happy to make that happen.
Karl, you and I will be talking. I've seen you in a lot of photos around this project, so we'll be talking.
Please.
Your social media does work. I mean, I see it.
All right, Kimberly. Is Kimberly here? I wouldn't be upset if Kimberly left. Kimberly's not here. Okay. Or is Kimberly online? We were going to still give you 10 minutes, Kimberly.
And what was Kimberly to talk about?
Survey Monkey.
Okay, because our Hannah is not here because she's at the Capitol, which I just came from a little earlier, but got stuck on the train because it decided to go backwards to Minneapolis instead of forwards to Central Station.
Well, if Kimberly is in the building and watching on the web or the YouTube, I think it's YouTube, right? Watching on YouTube, feel free to come down. We're going to move on, but if you do come before 2:20, we'll give you your full 2 minutes. We promise, Kimberly. All right, that being said, I'm just going to read a little bit from Hannah from this morning regarding what her legislative update would be. It's very, very, did you want to, sorry, go ahead, Daryl.
Oh, go ahead. I thought this was the same update she gave to us earlier.
No.
It might have been. I'm just going to read it because she just wanted me to. So this is, I'm just going to read verbatim what, as my phone tries to update me. Cancel. So what Hannah wanted to say. So the update for TAC is that the House and Senate have both passed different versions of House File 2887, which is the omnibus transportation bill. The two bodies now meet to discuss the difference of those bills in conference committee. That's just kind of how things work up there. In the Senate, we have Senator Dibble, Morrison, Carlson, McEwen, and Jasinski on their half of the conference committee. And on the House side, we have Hornstein, Cagle, Tabke, Brand, and Petersburg. I might have mispronounced some of those names. If I did, I'm sorry, representatives. But as usual, if specific issues come up, the Met Council always reaches out to us and lets us know, hey, look, if you need to chat with the legislator, please do. But the conference committee is probably happening right now, which is why she's not here.
Yep, they start at 2:00.
Okay.
Again, yeah.
So things are moving in terms of transportation and everything else at the Capitol.
And personally, I would have to say, I've been up there, I've watched the transportation bill be crafted. I've watched both Representative Hornstein and Senator Dibble put together their amazing targets and their packages. I do think that we can push the Senate on a little bit more things in terms of funding. But we'll see what happens. And I do appreciate Hannah's detailed information that she has given us over the last few months. And I do hope that we get the final update. She's not able to give it to us, I heard as well, because she'll be out of town or something. But I hope we can get it and somebody can put it in our packet. As well as I do think that, I think that's a benefit that we all have, is we keep that going. And I know that transportation historically went under this governor and in this administration, he has prioritized transportation a little bit more in his first term than he has this administration. But I do know that transportation overall is a priority that the governor and the state and many of us share in Minnesota. So I welcome that opportunity, that relationship that we have, and I wish that there was some way we could build upon it when we're not in session, but we kind of miss that when we get back in session. So I'll have to talk to you about it later. But so I wonder, as we move forward, and I have a couple of my committee updates.
Okay.
And I think I've given. I don't know if I sent Allison. Did I send you the gold line update or not? No. Okay. There's a cool little video. I'll send it before I leave the building today. We'll get it. It's a cool little video. It's about the update relating to the gold line, and it's I think a lot of it's drone related. As you know, that will be coming online, the BRT line, in 2025, hopefully, as long as there's no real issues. But it's a real exciting time. And the purple line, which I also am the tech person for that committee, that has changed a little bit in terms of we have a study that we're looking at, and we're going to see, instead of bringing it down the Bruce Fentel or the Bruce Fentel Regional Trail, we will try to bring it along White Bear Avenue in a couple of different sections. And I don't know how that will play out and how that will fare in terms of our study, feasibility study, but we're at least open to it. And Ramsey County had presented that option to Maplewood and some folks on the purple line. engagement team, including Nick Thompson with Met Council or Metro Transit, and a couple other folks. So that's pretty much it on my last update, and I can provide pictures or anything you want regarding that regard. And I do have, I'm gonna try to run back up the Capitol in a few minutes to see what it is I can get my hands on still, but thanks.
Thank you, Daryl. Before we move on to other updates, I think Heidi had a question or comment regarding legislative stuff. Take it away, Heidi.
Yeah, I got 2 phone calls, and so my name must be out there because of what I believe in. And one was on transportation and wanting to get my senator to vote on it because he got different minds of how he wants to use the money and the taxes and stuff. And then the other one with housing, but also they threw in transportation as part of the package because if my housing is, in the right spot, transportation would work and blah, blah. So it must be a hot topic this year because I've never gotten any, and neither just, organizations that are at the Capitol wanting these things, so there are local people in the community that want to make a difference. So keep that in mind.
It's nice to hear that they're reaching out to their constituents. Ken, do you have a Blue Line update for us?
Oh, and just so you know, it was all
Okay, go ahead.
my senators
Just
and
1 second, Ken.
legislation.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Okay, Ken, take it away, Ken.
Yeah, so Blue Line, we're not that much further than we were last time. We did have quite a large presentation on displacement mitigation, the work of the organization Cura that's been contracted to research that work. We're focusing on neighborhoods and what kind of displacement fears are out there and trying to address those. We're still not nailed down the preferred route from Target Center or the Target Station to the first station north in the extension of the Blue Line, but we're getting closer. There's a couple of options that are being narrowed down. We're in the middle of the environmental impact statement research on both of those alternative routes. And our meeting is typically on the same evening as our TAC meetings, but this one has been moved to next week. So our next meeting is next week, tonight, or Wednesday evening next week. So there you go.
Great, Ken. Thank you very much. Chris, is there anything to update on the Green Line?
Yes, there is, David. Thank you. I got an email last week that they're conducting spring walking tours at some of the construction sites. And if you go to swltr.org, you can sign up. The 2 Minneapolis walking tours fill up very quickly, but the suburban ones are you can still sign up for. So I actually visited the Eden Prairie and the Minnetonka sites myself, so I think it's worthwhile if it's something you want to look into. But you have to go to the Southwest website to sign up, and that will be mostly. I think they're all weekends in May, and that's all I got.
Thank you very much, Chris. Not a requirement, but did anybody want to? I know this work group, the bus priority seating work group, slowed down. I think there's some motivation to get it up and rolling again. But did anybody want to just take a minute or two to talk about the priority seating work group that we have going on? It's not a requirement. We are short on time.
I want to know how many. I mean, we did those videos and they were out. Then they stopped running them, and we were going to come back together, and maybe we should just really refresh that and put Metro Transit on the spot and say, hey, let's come back and where are we at in this project?
I think we can revitalize it. I think that's a discussion for offline. If that's okay with you, just to send emails out and get meetings planned again.
I think it's good to have it on the record, though. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that given the fact that the weather is getting nicer out and the snow is gone, that we hope that folks are going to use our system as we built it for them to use it, and it's designed for folks to use it. So, I mean, in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that some of those things are being, the drivers are being properly trained, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I've had so many positive comments this week compared to the last month of my transit ride. I've never had so many horrible experiences with public transit in the last probably 60 days than I've had in 20 years of riding the system. So, I mean, that to me is very alarming, and I guess that's why I am willing to put it on the record in saying that my family and I put up with tons of stuff being maced and all kinds of things on public transit, and so we can put up with a lot. So if I say that it's been challenging over the last 60 days, you can imagine kind of what I've had to put up with. So, I just want to make sure that we are looking at, the priority seating video and some of those other things that I know Chris wanted to recognize some former tech members and former tech chairs, actually, is what he said particularly, which I've tried to get a hold of a couple of them. I'm not even sure how many of them are still in existence. But I definitely know that even if we can get a hold of a couple of them, that would be nice. But
Thank you, Daryl. Anybody else? Perfect. Okay, cool.
And David?
Yes, go
this
ahead.
is Ken.
Yeah, take it. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I would just like to put on your agenda to talk more about, and we can talk further offline to flesh it out a little bit more. But I've got a little bit of a concern that I'd like to maybe invite someone from Metro Transit to come and explain what the current policy is for Metro Transit related to bus jumping. We've had this issue on and off for quite a while. And it's my understanding that we have been told before that bus jumping is not allowed. Now there is a video out that Metro Transit has created that shows how bus jumping is allowed and what process is supposed to be followed. I have some grave safety concerns about that, how the implementation of that new policy puts people in danger. And so I would first like to find out if there's a new policy, what it is, and what that looks like, and then how we can kind of have a discussion about the safety efficacy of such a implementation.
Thank you, Ken. I will consider that we have just moved into member comment now, because that is definitely a really good member comment for future. So what I'm going to say right, hold on, please. What I'm going to say right now is we're not going to have a discussion about this right now. We do not have nearly enough time to have a discussion about this right now. We have 5 minutes left, and I think this is more like a 40-minute discussion. So we will not respond to Ken's question, because that is not how member comment works, and it is not technically an agenda item either. But I think that will be an agenda item, Ken, in the next month, I would say month or two. I think that's a very important point to bring up. Thank you very much. Now that we are in member comment, I will let other members have comments if they want. Again, this is not a discussion about the policy regarding bus jumping. Do other members have comments about anything else at all? Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to follow up on what Daryl says. Over 30 years ago, I was working with a group that had cerebral palsy. It was a small group in Metro, and their transportation was a mess. And until 30 years ago, they got Metro Mobility and got a little organized. And what I was thinking is, to celebrate those 30 years, we should recognize the people that brought us to this point. A few years ago, I think in my first term, we we were looking at different cities and how they handled their transit. And, you know, our system was a lot better than many of the major cities in the United States. But I think we should recognize the chairs or the members that helped bring us to this point, and the staff, because it doesn't work if all three doesn't work. So what I'm proposing, I'll come up with some ideas and I'll send them to you and Daryl, and we can go from there.
Please.
Thank you, Chris. Any other members have a comment? I will move on to my chair's report now. I have a couple things that I'd like to propose. And first thing, Andy Strezik was not able to make it today, but wanted me to remind folks that the Metro Mobility Paratransit Appeals Panel is still hoping that all of you will fill out the application to be on that panel if needed. It's not a requirement, and you may never get called to be on the panel. And if you do get asked, you can say no. It's a pretty straightforward and simple thing to do. So if you want to sign up for that, please do. I've participated in, I think, 3 now. They happen maybe once every other year, very infrequently. But just a plug for Andy. And then we have 2 minutes. Hold on one second, Joe. We have 2 minutes, and I do want to hopefully make this decision today, or we can make it offline if I just plant the seed today. But Heidi did remind me before the meeting today that our July meeting is July 5th, one day after July 4th. This is a perennial discussion that we have. Do we have a July meeting? Do we not? The last few years, I think July 4th fell not close to our meeting, so we did have meetings. But that being said, I would like to hear from folks. Let's just do it right now. We have a minute or two. Folks' thoughts on July.
Vacation around that time?
So Allison will not be here.
Well, I'd be here. I just scheduled a vacation around when
Okay. So maybe a show of voice or hand, folks who can, or I'm sorry, folks who cannot or do not plan on being around on July 5th. So not. So we have 1 Chris. We have Diane. That's 2. Anybody else?
I'm 11 miles away, so.
I'm not quite sure. I am going somewhere, but I might be back by July 4th. So we have 2. Okay. So Heidi, you will be here. You can attend, is what you're saying. Okay.
I am going to be here.
Okay, perfect. So as it stands
I
now,
thought it was so close that we might not have
Yeah.
enough to do anything.
I think as it stands now, I'll send out an email to query some folks who weren't here as well. And also, I know it's 2 months away. People might change their plans in between now and then. I'll send out an email to ask folks again to let me know if they can or cannot be here, and then we'll make a decision on that.
And Chair, I suspect that if I can't get the state fair to come next month, that they'll try to come in July, just before the fair opens.
Yes.
So I suspect that we will have something to do in July, even if we're looking to take that day off.
Yeah, it's rare that we don't have a backlog on our agenda. So, but I do not want to force people to cut their vacation short. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Nobody online, nobody in the audience. Fantastic. Let's see, did we cover everything? I think we did. All right, we are right at 2:30. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Have a wonderful, beautiful May 2nd? May 2nd.
Yeah.
May 3rd.
May 3rd.
Third. A day behind.
Living in the past.
Bye, all.